I never meant to tell her anything. It just slipped out, like a word you whisper to yourself and realize too late that someone heard. It was a Wednesday evening, the kind where the air felt stuck between warmth and rain. I'd come home from work, still smelling faintly of engine oil, and saw her on her porch, same as most nights, watering the potted plants lined in uneven rows. Her house always looked lived in, like someone who didn't try to impress anyone, but still somehow did. Her name's Marion. She's maybe mid-40s, maybe a little older. It doesn't really matter. What stood out wasn't her age, but the way she carried herself, calm but deliberate, like someone who'd long made peace with being looked at and never asked for it. We'd spoken before, just the usual neighbor talk, mail mix-ups, parking spaces, her asking me to fix the squeaky gate that connected our backyards. But that night, something was different. I'd just gotten a call from my brother. We'd fought again. Over money, over who was supposed to help our mother more. It left me with that kind of anger that sits in your throat and burns. So when she looked up and asked, "Rough day?" I didn't answer the way I should have. Instead, I said, "I told my brother I wish he'd stop calling me altogether." Her hand froze halfway over a fern. The sound of water hitting the leaves slowed. She didn't say anything for a few seconds, long enough for me to regret opening my mouth. Then, she turned off the hose, set it aside, and said quietly, "That sounds like something you don't really mean." I laughed, trying to cover the discomfort. "Maybe I do." She tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly, not judgmental, just seeing. "Or maybe you just need space to breathe before you talk again." It was such a simple thing to say, but it hit differently. Maybe because she said it like she'd been there before. Like she wasn't offering advice, just recognition. For a moment, neither of us moved. A car passed by, breaking the silence. The smell of wet soil drifted between us. I wanted to look away, but her gaze stayed on me, steady, soft, too understanding. Then she smiled, barely. "You want some tea?" "Sure," I said, though I wasn't sure why. Inside, her house was dim, quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty. A faint tune played from a radio somewhere. A jazz station, maybe. She moved easily, without hurry. Everything she did felt intentional. The way she set down the cups, how she stirred sugar in one but not the other. "You take it black, right?" she said. I blinked. "How'd you?" "You don't strike me as someone who hides behind sweetness," she said, handing me the cup. Her tone was light, but it landed heavier than it should have. We sat across from each other at her small kitchen table. The only sound was the ticking clock above the sink. She asked about work, and I told her a little. How some days I felt like I was wasting time fixing things that never stayed fixed. "That's most of life, isn't it?" she murmured. Trying to hold things together that were never meant to last forever. Something in her voice lingered after she said it. Regret, maybe. Or memory. She looked away, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. I wanted to ask what she meant, but didn't. Instead, I just watched her hands, small and careful, the way she held on to things as if they might break. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. Rain had started to fall, soft at first. "You'll talk to your brother again," she said, almost like a promise. "Maybe," I said. "Depends how long this rain lasts." She smiled. This time, it reached her eyes. Rain always stops eventually. I should have left right then, but I didn't. I stood there, half under her porch light, half in the rain, trying to find something to say and failing. She noticed, of course. "You're overthinking," she said softly. "Yeah," I muttered. "It's a bad habit." Her expression softened, and she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "Keep it. Some habits mean you care." That was the moment. Small, nothing on the surface, but it stayed. I went to bed that night still tasting her tea, still hearing that line echoing under my breath. And I realized, I wasn't sure if I'd shared a secret that night, or if she had. The next time I saw her, she was struggling with a ladder. It was Saturday morning, and the air smelled of damp grass and paint thinner. I'd been tightening a loose bolt on my bike when I heard the scrape of metal against concrete, followed by her quiet curse under her breath. Marion stood at the edge of her driveway, trying to hang a string of paper lanterns along the wooden awning. The ladder wobbled slightly beneath her. "Need a hand?" I asked, already setting my tools aside. She looked down, surprised. Her hair was tied back, loose strands brushing her cheek. I thought you were busy fixing engines, she said. I take weekends off to rescue neighbors from potential concussions. Her lips twitched, the kind of almost smile that doesn't last but leaves a trace behind. She stepped down, letting me take her place. They're from my daughter, she said, handing me the last few lanterns. She sent them last spring. I've been meaning to hang them since. Almost a year, I said, glancing at her. Almost, she replied. No explanation, just that one word that seemed to hold too many others. I hooked the last lantern, the paper brushing against my fingers. When I stepped down, she was looking up at the string, the soft round shapes swaying gently in the breeze. They look nice, I said. They look like something trying too hard to be festive, she murmured, and then caught herself. Sorry, I'm not great at pretending cheerful. The honesty in her tone caught me off guard. I wasn't sure if she expected me to answer, but I didn't. Instead, I washed her hands. She kept rubbing her thumb over the edge of her ring finger, where a faint indentation still lingered. A small detail, but it said more than anything she'd told me. She noticed my gaze and dropped her hand. Old habit, she said. I nodded, pretending not to understand more than I should. Those are hard to lose. Some shouldn't be, she said quietly, looking toward her garden instead of me. A breeze moved between us. The lanterns clicked gently against one another, and for a moment, her face softened, the guarded lines around her eyes eased, the weight she carried visible only in how she exhaled. You look tired, I said before I could stop myself. She gave a short laugh, not defensive, not amused, just weary. That's because I am. Some weeks feel like they forget to end. I wanted to ask what made them so long. But I knew that if I asked, she'd close up again, and I wasn't ready for that distance. So I just said, you should come by for coffee sometime. I make a terrible one, but it's still coffee. She turned to me, studying my face for a second longer than felt casual. Then she smiled, small, fragile, but real. Maybe I will. And just like that, she was back behind her invisible wall, turning toward her house, pretending to adjust one of the lanterns. But as she did, I caught her reflection in the window, a flicker of something unguarded, like warmth she hadn't meant to show. And for the rest of the day, that single look stayed with me, quiet, uncertain, and impossible to forget. It started raining just before dusk, the kind of rain that looks silver under the streetlight and sounds heavier than it is. I was on my balcony when I saw her standing outside, struggling with her umbrella. The wind kept turning it inside out, and she laughed softly, not out of amusement, but resignation. Without thinking, I called out, "You're losing that battle." She looked up, hair sticking to her cheek, and shouted back, apparently. When I crossed over with a spare umbrella, she was already soaked. "You could have just waved," she said, accepting it anyway. "You'd have ignored me," I said. She didn't argue, just smiled, that tired, amused smile again. "You might be right." A moment passed before she added, "Power's out." I was about to light some candles. "Want to come in until it stops?" Inside, the house smelled faintly of rain and cinnamon. The lanterns we'd hung last week glowed dimly, flickering like nervous hearts. She handed me a towel and went to light a few candles on the table. The soft light made her face look warmer, but her eyes still carried that same quiet distance. We sat across from each other, listening to the sound of rain tapping the windows. There was something in that silence, a comfort that shouldn't have been there. "You ever notice how storms make time weird?" she said after a while. "How so?" "They make everything pause. The world feels smaller, like you're trapped in a memory instead of a moment." I watched her fingers trace the edge of the candle holder. "You sound like someone who's been through a few of those." She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe too many." Before I could respond, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, and I caught the name, Daniel. The look that crossed her face wasn't surprise, but something older. Fatigue, maybe. She silenced it. No explanation, no comment. Just that quiet act, and then she met my eyes again. "He still calls sometimes," she said softly. "Out of habit, I guess." I didn't ask who he was. I didn't need to. "You don't have to explain," I said. "I know," she whispered. That's what makes it worse. The rain hit harder against the glass. The candlelight trembled. I could see her hands shake just slightly before she folded them in her lap. You ever wish you could start over? She asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. All the time. And do you? No, I said quietly. I just end up standing in the same place, hoping it feels different. Something in that answer shifted the air. She looked at me, really looked, and for a moment, everything else faded. Her hand moved slightly across the table, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her skin. She didn't touch me. She didn't need to. The distance between us felt thinner than breath. Then the power flicked back on, sudden, blinding. She blinked, pulled her hand away, and stood quickly. Looks like the storm's done, she said, too fast. I nodded, pretending not to notice the way her voice shook. As I left, the rain had stopped, but the air still smelled electric, like something had almost happened and decided not to. And I couldn't decide which part hurt more, the almost or the not to. She hadn't called or waved for a few days after the storm. I told myself it didn't matter, that neighbors go days without talking, but it sat in me like an unfinished sentence. Every time I heard the creak of her porch steps or the click of her back door, I felt that strange pull again. When she finally did appear, it was late, the kind of hour where the world feels quieter than it should. I'd been sitting outside, nursing a mug of coffee gone cold, when I saw her light come on. A few minutes later, she was standing by the fence, arms folded against the chill. You're still awake, she said softly. Couldn't sleep, I replied. You? Same. I gestured to the chair beside me. She hesitated, then sat. The silence between us wasn't awkward this time. It was heavy, like both of us were holding something we didn't know where to put down. For a while, the only sound was the hum of distant traffic. Then she said, barely above a whisper, I keep thinking about that night. I looked at her, but she didn't meet my eyes. When the power went out, I asked. She nodded. It was quiet. I haven't had quiet like that in years. It scared me how much I liked it. Something in the way she said it, the honesty, the vulnerability, made me feel like I was trespassing. I didn't mean to make it weird, I said quickly. She finally turned toward me, her eyes tired but steady. You didn't. She paused, her breath catching slightly. I did. Neither of us spoke after that. The porch light buzzed faintly above us. I watched her hands, always her hands, clasped too tightly together, like she was trying to contain something. After what felt like a long time, she said, What are we doing? Her voice wasn't angry, just lost. I wanted to answer. I wanted to tell her I didn't know, that I hadn't meant for any of this to happen. The late-night talks, the unspoken closeness, the way my days felt wrong when I didn't see her. But the words wouldn't come out right. So I just said, Nothing. She gave a small, sad smile. Doesn't feel like nothing. The silence after that felt different, not empty, but full of everything we wouldn't admit. I don't want to hurt anyone, she said quietly. You're not, I said, though I wasn't sure it was true. She looked at me again, and this time, I couldn't hold her gaze. There was something in it, an apology, maybe, or a goodbye she hadn't spoken yet. I can't keep pretending this is harmless, she whispered. The words landed between us like glass breaking softly. I nodded, because what else was there to do? The air felt thinner, sharper. When she stood to leave, she didn't look back. But before she reached her door, she said, almost to herself, Some silences don't protect us. They just delay the truth. And then she was gone. I didn't see her for nearly a week after that night. The air between our houses had changed. Too still, too polite. I'd find myself glancing toward her porch whenever I came home, pretending I wasn't waiting for something. Then, one afternoon, a small envelope appeared in my mailbox. No address, no name. Just my first name, written in her careful, looping handwriting. Inside was a note. Could you fix the gate one last time? It's starting to come apart again. That line, one last time, sat heavier than it should have. When I knocked on her door, she opened it halfway, holding her phone. Her eyes were puffy, like she'd been crying but tried not to show it. I didn't mean to bother you, she said quickly. You didn't, I said. What's wrong with the gate? She hesitated, then stepped aside. It's easier if I show you. Outside. The wood was splintered where the latch had come loose. I started working on it quietly, the familiar rhythm of screws and hinges giving me something to focus on. She stood nearby, silent except for the faint sound of her phone vibrating again. "Someone keeps calling," I said without looking up. She gave a small, humorless laugh. "It's him again. Daniel." I waited. "I used to think he'd stop eventually," she continued. "After the divorce, after the years, after the silence. But he never really did." Her voice cracked slightly, not loud, not dramatic, just honest. I straightened, meeting her eyes. "You could block him." "I tried," she said. "But then he sent me a voicemail. I deleted it before I listened. Then I saved it again. I don't even know why." She pulled out her phone, thumb hovering over the screen. "Do you want to hear it?" she asked suddenly, like she needed someone else to decide. I nodded. She pressed play. A man's voice, soft, tired, older. "Marion, I saw the lights still on in the house when I passed by. I just wanted to say you were right. You always were. I just never said it when it mattered." The message ended there. Just that. She stared at the phone a moment too long before setting it down on the railing. "It's strange," she said. "You wait years for someone to say something, and when they finally do, it's too late to change anything." I didn't know what to say. I just reached for the gate again, pretending to focus on the hinge. But my hands weren't steady anymore. When I turned, she was watching me. "You remind me of him," she said quietly. "Not his age, not how he looked, just the way you listen." The air around us shifted. I could feel it, the echo of something unspoken, the overlap of past and present. "Is that a good thing?" I asked. "I don't know," she said, voice trembling. "But it scares me." A gust of wind moved through the yard, and the lanterns above us swayed again, the same ones we'd hung together. One of them flickered, the light inside struggling but not going out. Neither of us looked away. She didn't avoid me this time. The morning after her confession, I found her sitting on the front steps, coffee cup in hand, the air still cool and gray. I hesitated at first, unsure if I was welcome, but she looked up and gave a small nod, the kind that said you don't have to ask. I sat beside her. Neither of us spoke. The quiet wasn't sharp anymore. It had softened, like it had accepted us. Her fingers traced the rim of her mug absently. "I shouldn't have said all that yesterday," she murmured. "You should have," I said. "It's the first thing you've said that felt like breathing." She laughed, a small, uneven sound, then shook her head. "You don't know what you're getting into." "Maybe not," I admitted. "But I don't think that's the point anymore." The neighborhood was still half asleep. Somewhere, a dog barked. A car door slammed. A breeze carried the smell of rain-soaked earth. It all felt strangely vivid, like the world had slowed just enough for us to catch up. She looked at me, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple," I said. "It's just honest." She turned away, staring across the street. "You remind me of who I used to be, before everything got complicated." "Maybe that's why I can't stay away," I said quietly. "Because you remind me of who I want to be." Her breath caught, just slightly. She didn't answer, didn't move. For a long moment, we just sat there, the air humming with all the words we weren't saying. Then she said, almost to herself, "If we keep this going, someone will get hurt." I thought about that, about the truth in it, the inevitability. "Probably," I said. "But maybe being close to someone is supposed to hurt a little." She exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that sounded like surrender. "You're too young to talk like that." I smiled. "You're too wise to keep pretending you don't feel it." That broke something between us, not in a dramatic way, just quietly, the kind of break that lets light in. She set her mug down, then reached for my hand. Not suddenly, not impulsively, just finally. Her fingers were cool at first, then warm, her grip hesitant but real. We didn't look at each other. We didn't have to. The moment didn't need eyes, it only needed stillness. The world moved around us, the faint hum of traffic, the flicker of sunlight breaking through clouds. And for the first time, the silence between us didn't ask for anything more. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Let's not name it. Let's just let it be what it is." I nodded, tightening my hand around hers. And in that small act, that fragile, quiet agreement, something in both of us gave way. Not a fall. Not a confession. Just a collapse into something that had been waiting for us all along. It's been months since that morning on the steps. We still see each other, sometimes every day, sometimes not for a week. The rhythm is different now, slower, quieter. Not absence, not distance, just understanding. People ask sometimes if we're together, but I never know how to answer. Together feels too small for what it is and too large for what it isn't. What we have doesn't fit into a name. It just exists. She still tends to her plants every evening. I still find excuses to linger outside when she does. Sometimes she waves me over, sometimes she doesn't, and either way feels right. We learned how to share silence without needing to fill it. That's harder than I ever realized. The night after everything changed, she told me something that stuck. People think love is a fire, she said, her voice low. But sometimes it's just a light you don't notice until it stops flickering. At the time, I didn't really understand what she meant. I do now. Because what grew between us wasn't the kind of love that explodes. It was the kind that lingers. The kind that reshapes you quietly, like water smoothing a stone. She taught me how to listen, not to words, but to pauses, to the spaces between what people say. I used to think connection came from talking, from confessing, from naming what you felt. But with her, it was the opposite. It was in the glances, the restraint, the moments we chose not to cross certain lines. And somehow, that made it deeper. There's a different kind of courage in holding back, in choosing care over impulse. I think we both found that in each other. I'm not sure where she stands now with the man who used to call. She never mentioned him again, and I never asked. Some things don't need revisiting once they've been put to rest. As for me, I don't wait by my window anymore. I don't replay every word or look for meaning in every gesture. But when she passes by and smiles, that small, knowing smile of hers, something inside me still stirs, gentle and unhurried. Maybe that's what love really is at its best. Not the chase, not the drama, not even the staying, but the quiet recognition of having been seen, even once, completely. I used to think I shared a secret with her that night we first talked. Now I realize the secret was never the words we said. It was the feeling that neither of us knew how to name, yet both carried like a quiet promise. Whatever it was, whatever it still is, I'm grateful for it. Because sometimes, the most lasting connections aren't the ones that begin with fireworks. They're the ones that end with peace. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?